Well, we are back, and there he is. Hey, Igor. And while we get ourselves settled now into real time, at least from our end, I just wanted to start with a reminder to all of you watching. If you've got any questions or comments, please use the handy Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and send us your questions, your comments, and anything else you want to talk about. And we'll be glad to try to get to them in the very limited time that we have moving forward. Also, a quick reminder that this program is being recorded. It will be eventually finding its way to the Graduate Center website, where those of you who want to watch it again or who have friends who missed it can check it out. Apologies for the brief technical glitch early on. It is one of the exciting and frustrating things about dealing on a tech platform, as it is in musical performance. No matter how well prepared, you never know what's going to happen next. So thank you for bearing with us. The only other thing I just wanted to mention is that this underscored series, this virtual series, and this partnership with the Graduate Center, which we've undertaken for, well over a year now, has really been a kind of musical lifeline for us during this lockdown. And it really has been a way to share so many interesting pieces with you all, and to spotlight some of the extraordinary works that are part of the American musical legacy of the last 100 or 150 years. And we're grateful for you to be joining us for this as we slowly return to increasingly live activities again. We will find a way to integrate all of this into what we're offering. So welcome, Igor. Should I say welcome back to the Graduate Center?
Yes.
You spent
whichever way is fine. Yes, it's nice to be on stage at the Graduate Center, directly or indirectly, or in front of the Graduate Center audience. Anyway,
for sure, and we're glad to have you. So I thought while we're waiting for for questions to come in. I actually also, by the way, want to send out a special welcome to the Composer Fellows who have just gathered at Copland House for our 2022 Cultivate Emerging Composers Institute. I think they are with us, along with Cultivate's director, Derek Bermel, who is not only an extraordinary Grammy-nominated composer himself, but is also the founding clarinetist of the Music from Copland House. So all of you out there, hello and welcome. Send us your questions, composer to performers, if you like. So Igor, let me ask you, I mean, you've played a quite wide range of repertory, but I seem to remember that you had not played this piece of Gabi Frank's before this film. Is that right?
that's absolutely right. In fact, this combination, which seems to be a pretty obvious connection between the piano trio and a wind instrument, one would think there'd be more pieces, but when musicians are asked what pieces do you know, typically it's just a Messiaen quartet for the end of time. Maybe Hindemith, maybe, but pieces like Gabi Frank's piece, it's terrific. I really, truly enjoyed performing it, and it's considering this was my first try at it. I very much enjoyed not just the music itself, but the style and certain demands that she placed on musicians. And what I really liked is the idea that practically every combination is explored between the four instruments. So only the two movements, the audience would have noticed, the first and the last movement are the only ones that all four instruments are performing together. Everything else is a combination of one or the other. And so I got to play with just about everyone on a much smaller scale.
Yes, for sure. And tell us a little bit more about it. I mean, Gabi is a really terrific pianist. Um, and the piano writing is distinctive and idiomatic, and it's a wonderful use of the instrument. But let's talk, since the clarinet is really so often highlighted, especially as you said, in some of the movements where there are smaller combinations. Tell us a little bit about how you found her clarinet writing.
Well, I think it probably, and I'm not going to speak for her, but this is just my guess. I think she probably based in on what since the piece is based a lot on the Peruvian tunes, and I'm sure there was an instrument out there in Peruvian culture that would have been an inspiration behind using clarinet. I suppose she could have included flute because we always think of music, Incan music that involving some sort of a flute-like instrument. But I'm grateful she used clarinet. I think clarinet brings its own interesting colors and ability to work with other instruments. And I do agree that she features clarinet. I wouldn't even say sometimes, but I think in all of the movements outside of the movements one and eight, the other movements, clarinet is prominently featured. Certainly with the cello. Cello is a great accompaniment, but hardly ever a leader. And so it plays. Gabriela places responsibility of being kind of a leader and shepherd in this in the second movement, in the movement with the juegos, with the three instruments playing the two strings and clarinet, is also a terrific, quite challenging technically. She explores the register up and down, and the tempo is certainly supporting one that would very much need to stay on the edge of their seat to really keep up with the excitement of the piece and all the challenges. And she also leaves quite a bit of room for sort of spontaneous movements. And it's this is what makes live performances so exciting, is you can practice and rehearse all you want, but things happen. Sometimes they happen at will, sometimes they don't. And it is really responsibility of us as musicians to react to them and to incorporate them into the piece as if that is what we were planning, no matter how surprising something may have happened.
That's right. As I said before, that's part of the fun and the frustration, both of performing, especially live performance. You can play a piece 10 or 20 times, and you don't quite know what the 21st performance is going to sound like or come out like.
I always think that a live performance is like a fingerprint. It is unique. Even if we were to perform the same piece back to back, literally within a short period of time, the performances would be slightly different because every passing moment, has its own stamp in time, and so we respond to that, and our performance gets affected by it. It might be very, very similar, but there would always be some uniqueness to it. And that's why I say when people listen to live performances, they are almost participating in the ritual of creation. Something is being created in front of them.
Yes, exactly. But circling back just for another minute to Hilos, to this piece, and the really thoroughgoing tone painting in it, and the sort of instrument painting, because it's interesting. I mean, she really is evoking the sort of sound and sense and spirit of these Peruvian songs and dances. And by the way, I think everything is original. I don't know that there really are any quotes to anything, any real pre-existing folk music here. But you mentioned the clarinet playing with the cello, for example, and you spoke about the cello being an accompanying instrument. It's actually something like a percussion instrument. She almost
That's right.
uses it as again, basically something that's very, almost primal and fundamental in folk music, of a melodic instrument and a percussive instrument.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with that, and I do think that rhythm is really at the basis of everything. I mean, when people ask me, well, isn't music all about sound? My answer is, of course, but sound is not really the cornerstone of music. It's all about rhythm, just like rhythm is foundation of life. I always give this example as, what if we take rhythm out of language? Because it is really rhythm that creates words and sentences. We would get just a bunch of sounds that are continuous and make no sense to us. But it is rhythm that puts the letters into words, words into sentences, and so on. So I do think that, and I know that sometimes musicians get offended by being said, well, you're an accompanist and then somebody else is a soloist. No, I meant it in the nicest way. So the cello is an accompaniment, but the kind of accompaniment that probably is more of a foundation of the piece. And so the cello part in the piece is the one that holds everything together. And on one hand, it needs to respond to what clarinet is doing, but on the other hand, kind of hold clarinet from running away and going off on his or her own. Yeah, I guess if there is no quotations, as you mentioned, and there's no direct input from the folk music in there, then the job that Gabriela did is absolutely fantastic, because it certainly sounds like it would have been coming from the Andes and from the music of whoever the native folks that could have been enjoying this. I do think that, again, going back to that second movement, that the rhythms are so fascinating and there's a constant changing pace of it, but there is a definite structure to it. I actually analyzed the movement going through the 7/8, 3/8, 4/8, and then all the switching meters in between. There is a pattern, but it's a much larger pattern, and one would have to see a much grander picture to notice it. And once you see that pattern, then things start making a lot more sense, and it has so much depth to it. So I very much enjoyed performing this movement, and because the piece is very much intertwined with things like that. I do think that it has, besides the sort of Incan phrasing or imitations of Incan music, it also has some elements of, perhaps, I would say, I'm afraid to even say it, maybe klezmer music, a little bit, yeah, or a little bit of a Hungarian type of music, because it's got even the very opening, the first phrase that clarinet comes in with, is something that could be, you would expect from a kind of a rhapsodic Hungarian gypsy clarinet singing. And also the little cadenza in the last movement, the strings prepare to tremolo, and the clarinet sort of soars on top of it. That also is kind of a singing gypsy Hungarian klezmer-ish. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to play in so many different styles within a relatively short piece.
For sure. And is that what you were getting at? I remember sort of late in our rehearsal period, you had made, and then when we performed it, you had made some kind of a comment about it took you a while to really get into the piece, and to I don't want to say you liked it from the very start, but to really sort of get a larger sense of the piece.
Well, yeah, so that brings us back to what I just said, is that it's seeing the bigger structure or the bigger pattern that takes a little bit, because when we start practicing the piece, we certainly have to sort of take it apart and learn the notes and figure out what the phrases are, what it means. And so it took, it takes a little bit of time to get into this, but once you feel comfortable with the material, with the actual material, then you can separate yourself from the tediousness of the notes and the dynamics and everything that you have already, and you start creating a bigger picture. And it's through this creation, first on your own, and then of course in rehearsals with your colleagues, when you get to hear the complete texture, then you start realizing, that's what it is. I mean, that now it all makes perfect sense. So it's not, again, it's not a bad thing that it took a while. It's just, I think the piece has so many interesting elements to it that it would be strange if I saw it all right at once and I just sight read the piece at home, my part. Oh, I can totally see it.
Yeah, it's a challenging work. I remember coming across something that Gabi said in an interview talking about her music, that it was a byproduct of her trying to figure out how much of a Latina she was and is, and how much of a gringa she is. Those are her own words. And there's a real balance here and a synthesis, because there are only traditional instruments used, and yet she spends a fair amount of time in this piece and in so many other pieces that she's written, of almost transforming these instruments to indigenous instruments. The dance of the bowler hat, and the dance of the devil and the spinning top, and what we were talking about, the old charango player, that she takes these traditional instruments and almost brings them back to their ancient roots, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. I also think that, for example, the Zumbayu, the spinning top, the movement that that we play, actually, it's clarinet and piano movement. That movement is very much pentatonic based. So
Yeah.
I think that's maybe where she's on her, I guess, on her mother's side, Peruvian and Chinese, right? So perhaps
Yeah.
that's where the Chinese, I don't know, influence, or I don't know if she did it on purpose. I have a feeling she probably did, but there's definitely a certain element of that the pentatonic element, and so you have to structure yourself the way that you play. You have to approach it in the same way. And again, I will stress it that it's very much appreciated by musicians when we're challenged to not just play in one way or form or style within the same piece. If the piece um, forces you to shift from one, well, become a shapeshifter, so to speak, to go from one character to another on a relatively short, in a relatively short time frame, and completely transform yourself and maybe make your instrument sound different according to what the composer is asking within the same larger composition. That is almost as if she's using not just four, but maybe 8 or 12 instruments,
Yeah.
because everyone had to do something other than typical standard playing of their instruments.
Yes, indeed. And there's a lot of shape shifting in here. Each of the 8 sections, the 8 panels of this suite, if you will, are very different takes on very different aspects of folk life, dances, songs, games, and so forth. Anyway, we could go on for a very, very long time. It's great having you. And what a fascinating piece this is. There was just one question that came up from Leslie. And the question was, what is the Graduate Center? And the full answer can be found online. The Graduate Center, all I will say about it is that the Graduate Center is part of the City University of New York system. It's a very special place with a very distinguished history, doing really, really terrific things. Igor, as I said in my intro, is a proud product of the Graduate Center, as well as other places. We're delighted to partner them. with them. Check them out online, a very special place. And Copland House, if I may add, for those who may not know, is an award-winning creative center for American music based at Aaron Copland's longtime home in the lower Hudson Valley, only about an hour north of the city. You can find more information about Copland House and what we do, the many things that we do at coplandhouse.org. For now, I just want to say, well, we just got one other comment, which was that it was a wonderful performance. And Mather thanks us for it. And we thank you for listening. Igor, thank you for the time, for a delightful chat. We look forward to seeing all of you again, hopefully live, hopefully soon, and hopefully at Elabash Hall in the Graduate Center on 5th Avenue in New York City. Thanks again for joining us, and have a lovely day. Happy music.
Thank you all. Thank you, Michael.